The Capitals beat the Bruins but lose to the Sharks?
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we will talk about your Caps team that doesn't have a true identity, if you ask me. How is it that the Capitals beat the Boston Bruins, who have the best record in all of the NHL, and then they lose to the San Jose Sharks, who are in 7th place in the Pacific Division? It's a bit of an interesting thing that I've observed the entire season. They can win these big games, and then they fall flat on their face against these teams that they should have won. We'll talk about that in the show. We'll talk about the game against the Bruins and what went well. We'll talk about the San Jose game and ultimately what went wrong there. And then what are the Caps going to do towards the trade deadline? Certain things are getting drawn into focus here. Is that some things need to get changed. Some things with the Capitals need to get changed. But just to get going here, your Washington Capitals do, in fact, take down the Boston Bruins. And it was a big game. You know, I went into it and there wasn't a lot of feeling that the Caps were, in fact, going to win that game. But they ended up coming away with a win. There was big takeaways from it. Nick Backstrom getting the power play goal. Garnet Hathaway, who's due for a new contract at the end of the season, he contributes and proves why he is so important to this team. And then Darcy Kuemper stepping up, playing big. And I think it was a big game for Darcy Kuemper in the regard that just to prove to everyone that he's still worth it. As we know, he got pulled in a couple of the last games. So for him to go out there and face the number one team in all of the NHL and save 27 of 28, we could not have asked for anything more from Darcy Kuemper. But just taking a look at the score sheet on the game, again, a big one for Nick Backstrom, who we know is coming back from that hip resurfacing procedure. And there is no sign, there's no indication to me at all that he is struggling or suffering at all. He is playing in top form. And it was just a game that the Capitals made the most of their opportunities. What do I mean when I say that? Is that the Boston Bruins were in the penalty box often, committing stupid penalties, getting drawn into penalties, and the Capitals made them pay. And, Darcy Kuemper and the defense slammed the door, and the Caps end up leaving Boston with a decisive victory. So riding high as the Capitals take down the Boston Bruins. And when I say a statement, when some people say, well, what's a win is a win and a loss is a loss. Well, not really. If you take a look at it, they took down, like I said, the Bruins, who have the best record. That was the litmus test. That was the measuring stick for this Caps team as to what they had in the tank. And it was a good feeling after that game. I got to say, after I got done watching the game, I'm like, well, maybe some of the negativity surrounding this team isn't warranted. Maybe they're a lot better than everyone thinks they are. And that was the feeling after the game. I think it was a team that was all pulling on the rope, as they say. And it was just a real great team victory. And I think to a certain extent that the Boston Bruins got kind of drawn into those penalty things. Marchand in particular is a real hot under the collar kind of guy. He gets worked up and he's a hard guy to cool down after that. And I think that, especially that Martin Faravari takedown of him, I think that he got really worked up in that. And it was just, all those kinds of dumb penalties. The Caps also did have, their time in the penalty box as well. But ultimately, that's what I would say about the game, is that Darcy Kuemper stood on his head, made the saves that he had to save, kind of to prove to the Caps, to his fellow teammates, to everyone in the NHL that, I got pulled in 2 of the games in recent memory here, but I am still here. And there's a reason that they're paying me the big bucks to be that number 1 goalie, to be that roadblock and net for the Caps, that they made a good decision by signing me. And, my pedigree and my reputation precedes me. And, I do feel good. I think that Darcy Kuemper did an amazing job. He only allowed 1 goal. Can't really ask for anything more. I guess in a perfect world, he would have stopped them all, but that's not realistic all the time. I think that he did a big thing out there. And then the other player too, like I talked about, Garnet Hathaway, he is coming up on a new deal. The Capitals have some tough questions ahead, and I'll talk about that in the last segment, about some players to come back. But of the players that should come back, and just talking about him in this segment is because of his contributions, that goal scoring, that fourth line. It has been most of the season Nick Dowd, Garnet Hathaway, and of his, originally it was Carl Hagelin, but we know that he's out, ostensibly the rest of the season. And it's been plug and play with Protas and Malenstein and Mantha and just a plethora of different players. But the steady force of this Capitals team this season, by far for me, has been that fourth line. And you don't hear that quite often. You think, it would be the top line with Ovi and, Backy and Kuzi out there. That's got to be the number 1. That's the one that's stirring the pot, right? Well, to an extent, of course, Alex Ovechkin is doing Alex Ovechkin things, which is scoring a lot of goals. But it's that grit, that identity line, that fourth line that has really helped propel this team. You take a look at a lot of other teams around the league, and their fourth line is, some, plug players, an AHL player. It's some grizzled old vet that's, towards the twilight of his career. But the Capitals have a really great fourth line. They can score goals, and with Garnet Hathaway on that line, you have that intimidation factor. You have, that tough presence. There are some tough players on this team. Tom Wilson, who's not currently in the lineup, is one of those players, and another one of those is Garnet Hathaway. It is my assessment that the Capitals have to do their level best to bring Garnet Hathaway back to Washington, re-sign him to a new deal. He is an integral part of this team. I know what a lot of people are going to say. Well, you want this team to get younger, and they've gone in that direction by signing Strome and Milano. I don't want a team of just all young players. I want the sandpaper personality. So you got Wilson and you got Hathaway, and they're not even exactly the same player. Hathaway is more of a sandpaper. He's more of a chirper in your ear. He'll drop the gloves, don't get me wrong, but the tough guy, that is more of a Tom Wilson thing, even though he's maturing a little bit more and kind of turning into more of just a bona fide goal scorer. And just, he doesn't even need to drop the gloves. Like I say, in that game against the Coyotes, he kind of just went over there and everything kind of just went away. It's just the fear that something that could happen. So having Hathaway out there as the chirper, as the guy that's, kind of just getting in your ear and aggravating you, and Tom Wilson, you need those kind of players. And there's a place for all those kind of different players on this team. You got Ovi scoring the goals, and Sherry, another guy they got to find a way to come back here. Tough questions that Marcus Johansson, a lot of tough things. Again, I said I'll talk about that in a later segment, but Garnet Hathaway stepped in, really helped in that Boston Bruins game. A tough, grimy goal, kind of up close towards the net. That is what was missing from the San Jose game. And we'll talk about that in the next segment here. It just seems that the Capitals had that gazelle intensity, that they were going to win that game against the Bruins because they knew it was such a measuring stick, and they did that. And I think that, they were just, so pumped after that one and so tired because it was a back-to-back that they played a San Jose game. And I don't want to say a trap game, but I'm going to say maybe a little bit of a trap game. They're like, guys, we went out there and we took down the Bruins, the number 1 in the National Hockey League. We're playing the San Jose Sharks, who are in 7th place. This should be an easy one, right, guys? Guess what? The Sharks threw the kitchen sink at them and subsequently sank the Capitals. So that's what it's all about. You got to be prepared for your opposition. Even if it's the Sharks, those teams are hungry and they want to prove what they're worth as well. All right, so after the break here, we're going to talk about ultimately what went wrong with the Caps against the Sharks. It just seems like it's so simple. They should just be able to play the Sharks and it should be an easy victory. Why wasn't it? We'll talk about that next. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started taking Athletic Greens because I wanted more energy. I wanted a supplement that actually tastes great. I wanted to see what the hype was about. Now, I've been taking it for several months and I love it. It doesn't taste like it's super healthy. It has kind of a mild tropical taste that I actually look forward to taking each morning. So, what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole foods, for superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of these things. Now, I personally take it because I have young children at home, and maybe if you have kids at home, you can relate. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything. It costs less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's cheaper than getting all the different supplements yourself. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up on the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In this next segment here, we're going to talk about ultimately what went wrong against the Caps and the Sharks today. It is a bit of an interesting thing for me. When I watched that Bruins game, I thought to myself, there we go. They're going to go on a roll now. They took down the best of the best in the NHL. They're just going to keep steamrolling. It wasn't the case. What was the case was a lethargic, it was a tired Capitals team out there. I think that they put their all out there against the Bruins, and they picked up the big W. I think that ultimately, if they would have had a day break in between, that possibly they could have played better. We know that there was also Anthony Mantha out of the lineup because of an illness. Insert Alexei Protas, and suffices to say he did not play in top form. Some untimely penalties and just some poor play. Really didn't endear himself to the Caps, I got to say. And this is crunch time. We don't have the luxury of looking down the football field or the ice, whatever kind of measurement that you want to look at, and think to yourself, well, you know what, we're going through a rough patch right now, but we've got all this time in front of us. We got time to turn it around. We are past that point. We are looking squarely at the trade deadline coming up on March 3rd. Big questions. Teams around the league are getting better and better. Bo Horvat to the Islanders, Tarasenko to the Rangers. That's just to start it off. Once those dominoes start falling, it's going to be bigger ones. And what are the Capitals going to do to keep pace? They're going to have to keep pace or they're going to get eliminated. Do you think that Islanders team is a lot better with Bo Horvat? You better believe they are. What are the Capitals going to do so they can stay competitive in this Metro? Again, it's an identity thing for me. That's the biggest thing when I look at this team. Big win against the Bruins, fall flat on your face against the Sharks. It's the hand in your face emoji, just like, what is going on? Who is this team? It's just, I love this team. It's a bit frustrating to watch them play sometimes because they'll play so great 1 minute and the next minute they won't. 4 months into the season, it's not clear who exactly the Capitals are, writes The Athletic. Are they a team that beat the NHL leading Bruins in Boston on Saturday afternoon, or the one that not 24 hours later was undone by a costly turnover, a bad goal, and an unnecessary penalty in a 4-1 loss to Erik Karlsson in the 28th place Sharks? This is a tough one, isn't it? It's to lose to a team like the Sharks that are not that great, and a team that has Erik Karlsson on it, and it's sounding more and more like he might be on the move at the trade deadline here as well. So it is, it's a deplorable team, to be honest with you. The Sharks are rather poor this season. It wasn't a good game for us. Coach Peter Laviolette said they were better than us in a lot of different areas. We were reaching, we weren't working, and turned the puck over too many times. We just weren't good enough to win a game. And that pretty much summarizes it, and it's not for a lack of trying. The one thing I'll say about Peter Laviolette is he saw that the lines weren't working. So he took the snow globe up and shook it up a little bit and tried to give the Sharks a lot of different looks. And ultimately, it wasn't enough. Again, I think it was a Capitals team that was tired. They were getting shots on net, of course. But they got to stick back to the basics. One of the things that they talk about, go after the goals like Garnet Hathaway scored against the Bruins. Because if you take a look at it, they were getting those shots on net. It's just that they weren't able to find the back of the net. If we take a look at it, so let's see, Dell and Kakkonen played in there. Dell made 8 saves on 8 shots, and Kakkonen made 12 saves on 13 shots. So again, it wasn't for a lack of trying out there. I do think that the Capitals did what they could do out there. Charlie Lindgren saved 29 of 32, so suffices to say he wasn't totally dialed in. I'm going to be, cast blame equally. I don't think he was totally dialed in, but do I think it was solely his responsibility? No, it was the defense that wasn't playing that great in front of him either. There was coughed up pucks. Again, Alexei Protas not living up to, who we saw in training camp. Evgeny Kuznetsov scored Washington's only goal late in the second period to trim San Jose's goal to 2-1, but Aaron Dell did not allow them to get any closer. Dell, who came in relief of injured Kaapo Kakkonen and is San Jose's number 3 netminder, stopped all 8 shots he faced in the first NHL appearance since December 4th. So isn't that great? That they get their 3rd string goalie to come in there and slam the door in the Capitals' face, just when their goalie had to catch fire. It's, isn't that just the way things go always? When you go to the net, the good things happen. And I thought that the goal was going to give us momentum, Kuzi said, but unfortunately it didn't. The Caps won 5 games to close out 11-2-2 in December. In the 18 games since, they are 8-8-2. Their only consecutive win bookend the team's 10-day break for the All-Star game in the bye at Columbus on December 31st and at Boston on Saturday. So it's going to be a tough schedule going forward. They play Carolina twice this week. And Carolina, first place in the Metro Division. Do you think that's going to be a tall task? Yet another measuring stick for this Capitals team. We know they got the Stadium Series in there as well against Carolina. This is going to be a difficult week for the Caps, suffices to say. So are they going to be able to do it? I think that you're going to be able to see how the rest of the Cap season is going to go the rest of the year based on this week. And I know that's kind of a grandiose and over the top thing to say, but just take a look at it. Boston win, a game they probably should have lost. San Jose, a game they should have won, lost. So, you put that in a calculator, that's coming up 0. And then you take a look, they got 2 games, big games against Carolina. How are they going to fare in those games? That is the big question, because like I say, that is the number 1 team in the National Hockey League right now. In the Metro Division, excuse me. Boston is the number 1 in the NHL. And then they also have the game against the Florida Panthers, which, they've been kind of playing hot and cold as of late. So it is going to be an interesting measuring stick for the Caps as to who they are. I think that, if they could pick up, if they could win 2 of those games against Carolina, then I everything that I think about this team is changed. But if they say they lose both of those games to Carolina and even win against Florida, that's just, you're kind of seeing who this team is going to be. A pretty good team, but not a great team. A team that can go out and beat the Bruins, can lose to the Sharks, and say they do drop 2 to Carolina, which it's going to be tough. I'm not going to say they're going to lose it, but I'm just saying that Carolina is the best of the best in the Metro right now, and it's not even really that close. So it is going to be difficult. Again, I thought Boston was going to be rough, so anything is possible. Again, if they can go into Carolina, or if they can play both of those games against Carolina and win both of those, again, a big momentum change. But say they lose 2 of those, it's going to be a big thing there, and it's going to be almost insurmountable. Being that those games are in the Metro Division, those points always mean the most, right? So a lot's going to be determined here, and I think that a lot of it's going to unfold for the Caps. Take a look at the Islanders with Bo Horvat and all that. These are the games. The Caps are in the spot of the season right now where they got to win these games. There was no reason that they should not have beat the Sharks, a deplorable team, a horrible Sharks team. They should have won it. I'm glad they beat Boston, but just taking a look at it, they've got to find a way to win these games. But you know what it is? It's not dwelling on it. It's moving on, because if you just sit there and dwell on why didn't we win this game, then you're going to struggle the rest of the way out. What I know for right now, Tuesday night against Carolina, let's be ready to play. Let's be ready to play. Let's hope that Wilson can come back soon and really help out this team. And I ultimately think if there's going to be a game changer, they're going to have to pick up that depth forward. And if Carlson's out, that defenseman out there that's going to help this team. Otherwise, I think the Caps are going to be setting up tea time earlier than they ever have in recent memory. All right, so after the break here, we're going to talk about what moves around the Capitals are going to be, possibly taking place here. I know I've spoke about that a lot in this podcast, but it is coming up. It's crunch time. Trade deadline is on March 3rd. What moves are going to happen and what moves are going to happen in the off season? We'll talk about that next. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and the threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked-on. That's fanduel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In this next segment here, we are going to talk about the Caps. Are they buyers? Are they sellers? What is going to happen at the trade deadline? What is going to happen in the offseason? We hear a lot that Lars Eller is probably playing his last season with the Caps. Same goes for Anthony Mantha if they can find a taker. What is going to be the case here? So just taking a look at it, if the Caps solidify a spot in the playoffs, McLellan figures to bolster the roster. If they struggle, it's possible, if not likely, McLellan will be in sell mode for the first time since he took over in 2014, writes The Athletic. Washington has qualified for the postseason 8 years running. The last time I remember them not being in the playoffs was during the Adam Oates years, the one season, as a matter of fact. So it has been some time since that has been the case, and we really don't hope that's the case. And if it's the latter, the Caps feel like they're well positioned to sell with 10 unrestricted free agents, including forwards Lars Eller, Garnet Hathaway, Connor Sherry, Marcus Johansson, and Nicholas Abe-Kubel, as well as defensemen Orlov, Jensen, Van Riemsdyk, Gustafsson, and Matt Irwin. Connor Brown and Carl Hagelin are also UFAs, but are currently on long-term injury. And, taking a look at that, who do I want to come back? Garnet Hathaway, Marcus Johansson, Connor Sherry, Nicholas Abe-Kubel. I guess if I had to pick a weak guy out there, I'd pick Lars Eller to be gone. If I had to on the blue line, Nick Jensen. And, I guess, gun to the head, I guess I would say Matt Irwin, even though he has done nothing but played a good job when he's been called upon. Again, the guy you can put in the deep freeze and thaw him out, and he plays flawlessly. Those are the tough decisions that I don't have to make, that Brian McLellan has to make. Obviously, all of those players aren't going to come back. And a lot of it, like they talk about in this article, hinges on the Caps' performance. Are they going to go on a winning streak? Are they going to tank? Then if they do tank, you might see a lot of these big players move on to something else. If they go on a hot streak here, you might see Brian McLellan go out and try to bolster this team. But there's one thing you guys got to know as Caps fans. If this team, like I talked about in the previous segment, say something catastrophic happens and they do lose 2 of those big games against Carolina, and say they lose 3 in a row, for example, then they're in the mode almost for being sellers. It's getting to that point where they might be sellers, and there's just not enough runway to turn things around. And don't get me wrong, Brian McClellan did everything he could do by getting Kuemper and Lindgren to help solidify this team, getting Connor Brown and Dylan Strome to fill the holes where Wilson and Backstrom left. It just ultimately, it just doesn't seem like it's enough because of the myriad of injuries that has faced this team. Let's face it, Tom Wilson and Nick Backstrom missed a good chunk of the season. Tom Wilson is out again. Nick Dowd is out. John Carlson is out. TJ Oshie is in and out of the lineup. This is all part and parcel of dealing with an aging core. And I understand that younger players can get injured as well, but we're really starting to see into focus the aging core of this Capitals team. And, especially Oshie, he seems to be getting injured more than he ever has in the past. So tough questions lie ahead, and it's, everything is going to hinge on the play of the Caps here, up to, within this week. They have those 3 games this week, big games, decisive games, statement games. Again, if you can win these games, it could change everything. If you lose them, that can change everything as well. So with that as a backdrop, here's what I'm hearing about the Caps as the deadline approaches. Age was a big reason the Caps and the NHL's oldest team targeted forwards Strome and Milano as the first players to be signed. A priority for the past year has been to get younger, and by signing Strome, who's 25, to a 5-year deal, a $25 million extension, and Milano 26 to a 3-year $5.7 million deal. McClellan did that and locked up a couple of players he believes to be good fits in the short and long term. The Caps have got to get younger. We're all getting older. So are the Caps, and we talk about the Alex Ovechkin era, and, he wants to be on a competitive team. He's 37 years old, and he's got 3 years and change left on the deal that he's got. And then, the changes are going to keep coming no matter what. The Caps initially intended to take a wait-and-see approach with Milano, particularly after his underwhelming second-half season in Anaheim. But after a 5-goal, 10-assist outburst in December and January, McClellan decided he'd seen enough to warrant an extension with a $1.9 million cap hit. And I love it. I love that deal with Sonny Milano. Solid deal. I have no misgivings about that. I think that was a good thing. So who's next? It's believed that McClellan has connected with the agents for all the Caps' remaining free agents to get an understanding of their position, and he's currently in the process of determining the next steps. For some, that could mean an acceleration of formal negotiations. For others, the team is taking more of a wait-and-see approach. Who are those players that's a wait-and-see approach? It's going to be the blue line, of course, because we know John Carlson's the only one under contract. We want to see what this blue line does for the remainder of the season. If any of them start to drop off, those are going to be the first ones to go. I'm all in on keeping Orlov and Gustafsson and Van Riemsdyk around here, Faravari as well. But, it's tough questions. Obviously, they can all come back, and I'm glad ultimately I'm not the GM because those are tough decisions to make. But Caps fans, let's hope the Caps can turn it. The Caps can turn it around. I don't want to go down a negative rabbit hole. It's just a bit deflating. It's like someone took, a knife and stuck it into the side of your tire, and you could just feel that positivity and that swagger just drain out. After it got inflated from winning the Bruins, then the Sharks came and took that shiv and just right in the side, and you're like, oh. Who is this team ultimately? 1 minute I think that, they're a team that's on the rise. They take down the Bruins and you're pumping your fist. Yes, this is the team I remember. And then they play a game like the one against the Sharks, and you're like, this reminds me of the Golden Knights. This reminds me of, the Avalanche, even though I know that wasn't an apples for apples comparison, but just those big games, or the Maple Leafs, for example. So in any event, the Caps have got to find a way to turn it around if they want to be competitive. And I am rooting for them more than anyone to do big things this year. Let's hope they can do it. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.